Atheism is a lack of belief, nihilism is a belief. By attempting to draw the demarcation between nihilism and atheism to be too inclusive, we have introduced a Pandora's box of confusion, manifested today around what it means to be an atheist. Nihilism is a dogmatic counter-belief about a myriad of disdained subjects. Just as is the case with theism, it is an exercise in extrapolating conclusions into domains where science has not really been. In contrast, atheism is a lack of belief about deities only. I am not instructing anyone to do so, but, personally, I choose a lack of allow for rather than simply a lack of belief. This because a lack of allow for adheres more closely to the tenets of ethical skepticism. But at the same time I do confess an affinity for both the atheist and agnostic positions. I consider those who hold to those tenets as being individuals who are sincerely deliberating the issue. I do not consider the three belief category proponents above to be sincerely deliberating anything, rather trying to instruct me as to what I should believe.
So because you are playing around with semantics, this somehow makes you more of a sincere ethical skeptic? Maintaining a lack of an allow for isn't very open-minded as you try to make it out to be. How can you be someone who is seriously deliberating the issue of God if you have a lack of an allow for as part of your supposed open-minded approach? But this shouldn't even be outlined as an exercise of deliberating God. This is an exercise of determining the nature of reality. To look beyond this is to gloss over what is most evident and primary, to explore areas of speculation, operating under a default assumption that awareness in the way by which reality is assembled is unimportant, or a byproduct of inventory, of which wouldn't even be recognizable as such without an existential agency. And when it comes to this exploration, nihilism doesn't instruct, it points. So you go ahead and believe or disbelieve anything you want. Nihilism has no use for belief. Nihilism guides its way towards the truth by way of subtracting investments that are rooted in the false, not by getting stuck in a mirror and endlessly masturbating with arrangements of content.
Agnosticism contends that there can be no proscription nor prescription with the term God or deity, just as there can be no null hypothesis. A hypothesis requires a base of observation, intelligence, and a coherent definition. We have none of this, so all the claims of belief, neutrality, lack of belief, counter-belief, science did not observe this, or science proves that are all misrepresentations of science and discussions of absurdity, or reactions in anger, to the agnostic.
By that line of reasoning, there can be no proscription or prescription about anything. For these allowances or prohibitions of concepts represented by words would require one to have a base of observation, intelligence, and coherent definition concerning the very agency that is the center of all these considerations, and you have none of that. It would seem to me that this would be the place to start, and then work out from there. And that without such introspective inquiry, one isn't even qualified to open their mouth. But luckily, these types of explorations and experimentations have already been going on for thousands of years. And despite this being an area that material science can't find any ground in, the insights and discoveries within this area of exploration very often revealed fundamental truths about reality way before material science, who came along much later and confirmed them.
The agnostic is unskilled in the argument by choice. It is an ethic of attempting to regain the virgin Gnosticism of a newly introduced and dispassionate player, a refusal to enter the game of either the duality, belief anti-belief, or the pretense of knowledge of what the word deity means. But since one can never reclaim a virgin status, sadly the state of agnosticism is the ethical stance of the atheist who refuses the game. It is a circumspect and well-considered choice. In the above graphic, you see differentiated a position of knowing the definition of God, and choosing whether or not to hold belief, as distinct from either an ignorance of or a refusal to acknowledge God as a coherently defined subject. These are the two categories on the right-hand side represented by the gnosis and agnosis boxes respectively. The third box, virgin Gnosticism, is simply a term I made up to elicit the circumstance where we are not even aware that such a debate even exists. Moreover, nor are we aware of our own lack of belief in the circumstance. As a result, as in the case of aliens or newborn babies, they are brought to the table without any introduction into the debate in the first place. Agnosticism can be viewed as an attempt to try and regain this virgin status of gnosis, to go back to the circumstance where the argument did not even exist in the first place. And while one cannot step back to a status of pure virgin Gnosticism, agnosticism can be a viable alternative to knowledge-based lacks of belief, agnosticism and atheism.
Agnostic. Maybe this should just be called proud ignorance. If you want to be unknowledgeable, unskilled in arguments, unlearned in common definitions, unaware of what one believes, and have a return to the bliss of ignorance, then you really shouldn't even be writing this article, nor be granted a seat at the table of philosophical discourse. Go and sit at the theology table. You'll be in good company over there. But if you can't even assume to know what the word deity means, I doubt they will let you sit even there. A return to innocence is a nice ideal, but if such a thing was possible, you would already be enlightened, and would have no need to be concerned about these matters. A simple, pure, innocent being doesn't have a care in the world about theism, atheism, science, religion, or ideological debates. I don't see this as productive, as it only makes concessions to theists and gives them more legitimacy, enhancing their platform. If what you seek is to encourage atheists to be more open-minded, this does seem to be a bit of an extreme approach. Instead of stripping yourself down to ignorance and trying to cast all the qualities you dislike about atheism onto nihilism, you should instead just simply try to reach out and open atheists' minds. Because what you are attempting won't work. Nihilism isn't going to accept your asshole atheist rejects. And atheists are not going to start self-identifying as nihilists simply because it makes you more comfortable.
Even more so with this concept you call God. I have no idea what a God is, so I can make no claim as to whether or not one exists. Under a Wittgenstein definition of science, therefore, it is moot whether or not I know or do not know that I do not hold a coherent definition for God. Therefore, to Wittgenstein and an ethical skeptic, virgin Gnosticism is farcically moot, and indeed it is only posed as a lever for understanding here, and the two concepts merge into one philosophical entity called agnosticism. I refuse to acknowledge that the concept has been given a coherent or observation-based definition.
3 major holy books, thousands of years of conversion bombardment, and no shortage of people who are ready, able, and willing to give you a definition. And yet you say you have no idea what a god is. Yeah, that's the definition of willful ignorance, all right. Listen, it's not that complicated. If you are having trouble, then just pick up any dictionary. The concept has been given a clear and coherent definition. It may not be based on observation, but that's only because God is invisible. You know, he's pure spirit, and therefore can't be perceived by the human eye. Remember, this is God we're talking about, not nothingness.
Big A atheism. If you come to me presenting a program near and dear to my heart, supporting healthcare development for women and children and mitigating teen pregnancy on the African continent, then I'm going to be very interested. But if subsequently you insist that the only way for me to do this is to give to your foundation where it's all God anyway, and God loves a cheerful giver, well then you are just selling your religion in the name of charitable works. I will feel I have been misled. In the same way, if you come to me and ask me to lend support behind an atheist movement or discussion, something near and dear to my heart, then I am going to be interested. But if subsequently you insist that we are all simply flesh bits, and that self is proved by science to be an illusion of neurofunction, and then rattle off a political bent or the long list of things you disdain because there is no such thing and I am stupid if I even consider any of the ideas, well then you are worse than the religious peddler. First, because science is not even close to proving or even researching any of these things. Second, because you are peddling a personal conclusive cosmology in the name of atheism. Third, your cosmology is at least in part based on arrogant disdain for those unlike you. And finally, you are not even honest enough to be forthright about what it is you are actually selling me. I will feel I have been misled.
Yeah? Well, this isn't nihilism you are describing. It sounds like more unsavory aspects of atheism that you are now trying to cast onto nihilism with your demonization. Nihilism doesn't reference science, as science is more inventory. In fact, material science is actually the study of the ins and outs of inventory, of which is of no interest to the nihilist. The nihilist doesn't point towards inventory or content as the source or as the point of reference. Nihilism recognizes that content is a byproduct of source, and that source and point of reference is that which is aware of all this. So it would be silly for a nihilist to allude towards fleshbots or neurology or politics or cosmology or science, or to the importance of one narrative over another. For these are all false identifications and associations. They are all equally empty attachments. You are still describing the sophomore camp of modern atheism, not nihilism.
You are cryptically selling me nihilism, not atheism, no manner of compositional exclusion, special pleading nor lie of allegiance obsession over ancient history, inquisitions, holy wars or fundamentalist theism is going to belie this fact. You may fool those who have not been trained in graduate-level philosophy, however you betray your dishonesty or lack of training therein, by means of your denial. To those who have been trained, see Margold law. If you don't believe in Bigfoot, ghosts, phantasms, aliens, interdimensionality, mediumship, sensitivity, clairvoyance, clairaudience, twin connections, mind over matter, DNA analyses you do not like, eyewitness observations, near-death experiences, hopes, UFOs, spirituality, advanced forms of life, the afterlife and all that list of things which violate your critical thinking skills, all that is fine and I respect that, but please do not sell that personal religion as atheism, nor science. These things have nothing whatsoever to do with atheism. If you cannot resist an urgent desire to oppress, denigrate, mock or attack people who believe, observe or consider things you do not like, please do us all a favor and do not call yourself an atheist. This grand denial set is your personal religious belief, and as an atheist, I would rather you sell the depressive religious doctrine under some different moniker.
Again, more scapegoat horseshit. But here you reference training and a law, and berate your object of criticism as being ignorant due to a lack of training. Sounds very dogmatic to me. But no, what you are being boldly sold is modern atheism. And if you don't like it, then address it and seek to change it, instead of trying to deflect and redefine things you don't like into some kind of philosophical boogeyman. Sorry, Charlie. Most people already know that it is modern atheism who has the urgent desire to oppress, denigrate, mock, and attack people who believe, observe, or consider things they do not like. So I would focus on trying to ameliorate atheism, instead of this desperate attempt to blame nihilism while putting lipstick on the pig that is modern atheism. Nihilism knows that reality is a phenomenon that is interrelated to existentiality, and therefore doesn't have any strong oppositional stance towards the prospect of the paranormal or any such fantastical facets, but rather simply recognizes them as different aspects of the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious manifest in the awareness of the subject. More inventory to distract from what's clear, present, and self-evident.
Dubbing this form of oppression atheism or scientism is incorrect. When an atheist shoots up a school and puts a round into the head of everyone who identifies as Christian, yet spares the life of everyone who identifies as atheist, I would rather we call the religion of the gunman something else, other than atheism. Atheism is nothing but a personal choice as to how one regards stories of gods. It is not a religion, nor is it the ontology of the socially oppressive and violent. Let's leave that characterization to the nihilist, where it is consistently proven out in socialist uprisings. Only violent religions implicitly encourage oppression as a means of fulfilling their belief set. Atheism is not a religion, nor does it bear a tenet set, at least agnostic atheism does not, which could be construed as requiring violence to enforce.
Yeah, we know you would rather call the gunman something else, because you apparently have some kind of attachment to the perception of modern atheism that is not in accord with reality. And here again, we find evidence that you must be some disguised, anally wounded ex-theist. For you can't even separate religion and politics in your attempts to blame all ugly behavior on nihilism. What kind of anti-nihilist are you? Didn't you see The Big Lebowski? Don't you remember when Walter says...
Niles. Fuck me. I mean, say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.
No.
Do you understand what an ethos is? As in the fundamental spirit of a culture, the underlying sentiment that informs the beliefs, customs, or practices of a group or society, dominant assumptions of a people or period. People that engage in violence do so because they are heavily invested into objective morality, value, meaning, purpose, and narrative. What the nihilist has given up on investing in. Although maybe you have seen The Big Lebowski, because now you are trying to imply that nihilism is violent and oppressive, an association of which one has to wonder wherein it is derived. There is no belief set to push for a nihilist, no ethos. So I'm not sure where you're obtaining these associations. So that's why it's strange that you say that nihilism has been proven violent through socialist uprisings. What are you talking about? The revolutions in Russia back in the 1800s? Usually, wherever there is a revolution or an uprising, it usually means there is a tyrannical government abusing its citizens, and that it more than likely deserves to be overthrown. In this case, Russia decided that it was going to punish, quote, counterculture aspects by exiling them to Siberia, or by throwing them into prisons for absurd periods of time for the slightest perceived infractions. So a completely understandable revolution unfolded as a response, one that used nihilism as its identification. Probably because the oppressed felt very disgusted and disillusioned by the authorities and decided to reject them completely. But even with all that said, these movements were of a political nature, not a religious one. And the nihilistic qualities were certainly not born from deep philosophical ponderings. Yet that doesn't mean that this one historical instance defines what nihilism is as a whole.
Islam, Christianity, socialism, and nihilism do produce violence and oppression. This is the consistent lesson of history. They are all religions, and as such, yes, they can be held to account for the violence and oppression they demonstrably promote.
You must be one of these guys that thinks that just by making an accusation, it makes the accusation true, and associating things that are different, like a rock and a vegetable, make them the same thing. Politics and religion are two different animals. And no, the consistent lesson of history isn't that nihilism has proven to be violent and oppressive. History has demonstrated that value junkies are the ones who take up a sword for a side.
Therefore, knowing this, A dishonest nihilist will claim that they are not a nihilist, and moreover will hide under a shroud of philosophical atheism in order to protect and obscure their promotion of a religion. Fundamentalists attempted to hide under the moniker pro-family in order to enact politics in the 1980s. This ruse was religious political sleight of hand. In similar fashion, nihilists are habitually biased to one political party, fractious and immune to dialectic.
Man, your misrepresentations and straw man arguments know no bounds. Actually, an honest nihilist will claim that they are not actually a nihilist, because the nihilism is the position of no position, and therefore can't technically claim to be a group, much less a religion. And moreover, the term nihilism wasn't even a construct of any group that wished to distinguish itself as a faction. Nihilism was a term originally invented by advocates of theism to, guess what? Malign and demonize the rejection of theism, which, in their estimation, represented a major negation of a purportedly meaningful aspect of life. So get the facts straight. It's so stupid that it defies the imagination. This is like saying faggots or bitches are an organized group with an agenda and a violent history. It's just idiotic. It's just a bigoted generalization, much like your charge that nihilists are all biased to one political party, which, apart from being a generalization, is also just plain incorrect.
Fundamentalist Christians mistakenly sometimes attack this religion as scientism. There is nothing at all wrong, of course, with possessing a body of accepted knowledge and promoting the method by which we improve that body of knowledge. Therefore, science is not a religion. Rather, nihilists will again sometimes abuse the robes of science as a ruse to obscure and surreptitiously practice their version of religious belief and party fanaticism.
Backtracking, are we? In order to have an accepted body of knowledge, one has to draw lines to define that body, which means one has to take some sort of temporary position regarding unproven phenomena or fantastical claims about reality. Pigs don't fly, and it's safe to say as such until it is proven otherwise. Modern atheism is the only one here trying to employ weasel tactics and obfuscation, not nihilism. Nihilism doesn't place stock in science or religion, so this is more of the same. Bullshit deflections and demonizations. That would be a good title for a video.
Nihilism, from the Latin nihil, nothing, is a philosophical doctrine that suggests the negation of one or more of the reputedly meaningful or non-material aspects of life, socially enforced metaphysical or pseudo-scientific naturalism.
Nice definition, but you embellished it and added your own opinion into it. The word non-material was added, and the last part, socially enforced metaphysical or pseudo-scientific naturalism, is a complete fabricated addendum to the definition. Nihilism is, as the dictionary quoted clearly states, a philosophical doctrine that suggests the negation of one or more reputedly meaningful aspects of life. Period.
The following constitutes a practical application proof of why this definition of the term is correct, and why there exist many who claim to be atheists, yet in fact are nihilists. This begins with three foundational epistemological bases for nihilism as a philosophy which result in only one practical application of the philosophy, followed by its practiced result in terms of the specific tenets of nihilism which are sold today as a religion.
All right, let's hear it. And carefully deconstruct all the inevitable lies and distortions that are coming.
Secular humanism, often portrayed as a distinction without a difference. One can be secular and be a humanist without having to be a nihilist. Unfortunately, much of the secular world does not grasp this and conflates the two. Take Wikipedia, for example. In consistent fashion, Wikipedia fails to employ real philosophers to craft their material on religion, and instead relies upon social skeptics and those with an agenda to portray. Wikipedia defines secular humanism as the philosophy or life stance of secular humanism embraces human reason, ethics, and philosophical naturalism while specifically rejecting religious dogma, supernaturalism, pseudoscience, and superstition as the basis of morality and decision-making. As we examine the facets of what secular humanism comprises, we find the keywords reason, ethics, dogma, pseudoscience and superstition. I have spent a great many years on this earth, and I have yet to find even one person who said that they hold fast to dogma, pseudoscience and superstition, and yet reject ethics and reason. Not one person.
Who cares? This sounds like more theist apologetics, and is speaking in absolutes, which also reeks of theism. Maybe you weren't looking that hard, and that's why you can't find one. But I'm sure they are out there. But even if not, that doesn't mean that such a person is any less of a convoluted, confused individual. If anything, it reveals that they are being willfully stupid. I'm sure you are also going to find that most serial killers love their families and would be upset if someone victimized them. Yet it doesn't stop them from victimizing strangers, does it? Does this mean that they are any better of a person? Or is it just an example of hypocrisy and short-sighted ignorance that allows for them to practice behaviors that should normally result in cognitive dissonance?
This leaves the distinctive aspects of secular humanism as philosophical naturalism contrasted with that which one defines as the subsets of pseudoscience. Since I have yet to meet a single person who says they participate in pseudoscience, I find that the only way to detect the pseudoscientists is to ask someone who recognizes these people and makes such an accusation. Professional pseudoscience identifiers. Within the above definition, we are left with the philosophical naturalist as the only one who is qualified to make such an accusation. Remember that everyone claims allegiance to reason, ethics, morality, etc. No one claims to be an irrational pseudoscience dogmatist.
You have not met an impassioned dogmatist? Have you been living under a rock? You have yet to meet a single person who says they participate in pseudoscience. You must not get out very often, or maybe you live in a one-horse town. These people are everywhere, and even if you haven't met one personally, you can't deny being aware that they exist. And of course they will never fancy themselves as practicing pseudoscience, but isn't that the whole point of it? To try and pass off a study or a belief that doesn't rely on the scientific method for the basis of its data as one that does? Do we even need list examples of such activities? Flat earthers, astrologists, reptilian believers, and Scientologists. I mean, come on.
Again, Wikipedia outlines philosophical naturalism as, in philosophy, naturalism is the idea or belief that only natural as opposed to supernatural or spiritual laws and forces operate in the world. Adherents of naturalism, that is, naturalists, assert that natural laws are the rules that govern the structure and behavior of the natural universe, that the changing universe at every stage is a product of these laws. Naturalism can intuitively be separated into an ontological and a methodological component. Ontological refers to the philosophical study of the nature of reality. Some philosophers equate naturalism with materialism. For example, philosopher Paul Kurtz argues that nature is best accounted for by reference to material principles. These principles include mass, energy, and other physical and chemical properties accepted by the scientific community. Further, this sense of naturalism holds that spirits, deities, and ghosts are not real and that there is no purpose in nature. Such an absolute belief in naturalism is commonly referred to as metaphysical naturalism. So, since lovers of pseudoscience appear to be an aspect of what the eye of the beholder regards, and no one admits to such a terrible belief, we are left with the boiled-down residue of this distinction, net of all the self-congratulation, shuffle dance and social pigeonholing bullshit. All that is significant, all being, is accounted for by the mass, energy and other physical properties accepted by the scientific community, or at least as this additional claim, the boast of consensus is crafted: purpose, innate creativity, faith, love, malevolence, hope, charity, goodness, ethics, sacrifice, growth, spirituality, either are facets of the illusion of free will or can be reduced to the physical alone. There is no allowance for any potentiality outside this. It is a forbiddance, or zero tolerance of such a realm of consideration, employing science as an excuse, a strict denial, without evidence backing such, other than the entailed argument from ignorance.
All these purely materialistic assertions are understandably frustrating, as well as pig-headedly blind. But your beef isn't with nihilism. It's still a product of modern atheism. These are all arguments of belief, or of which inventory items are going to be classified as what, and which ones are going to be attributed to this or that. This isn't what nihilism does. In nihilism's view, to reject the concept of a theological God due to a lack of scientific evidence is to graduate kindergarten in philosophy. And to accept all phenomena of the natural world that can be scientifically proven is to graduate first grade. Only when one begins to examine their own awareness and the facets of existentiality does one begin to address the truth of reality. And to grapple with the truth of reality means that one must explore and unravel the secrets of their own agency. This is why it doesn't matter if it's science, pseudoscience, atheism, theism, secular humanism, naturalism, or whatever else. If it's pointing outwards away from itself, it's already addressing the wrong place. Not to say that one should ignore the natural world and not try to distinguish fantasy from reality. One should. For if not, then it won't be long before one is run over by a bus or taken into a mental ward for insisting you can fly off the side of a building. The illusion is illusion, but that doesn't mean you can ignore the rules of illusion before you have learned to hack them. So in the meantime, it's okay to acknowledge the physical properties, but that doesn't automatically translate that all aspects of reality are reduced to merely physical components. This is externalization, which attributes the source to extrinsic properties, while relegating the intrinsic truth of reality, awareness, the clear and present source of all things, as a byproduct of the extrinsic. It's a conditioning of the mind, which is equally prevalent in atheism and theism. Atheism and theism are both basically materialists. They just have different theories as to the nature and source of the materials. Nihilism knows that even materialism cannot be believed to be the reality. And this is why it's ignorant to try to equate atheism and nihilism. Yes, nihilism doesn't invest into the objectification of any inventory items, not even science and materialism. Nihilism understands the truth of existentiality, and therefore knows that facets, such as value, meaning, purpose, narrative, innate creativity, faith, love, malevolence, hope, charity, goodness, ethics, sacrifice, growth, and spirituality are the elements of existential agency, their innate functionality being determined by the agency itself, and not otherwise. And the potentiality of such things is wide open and ready to be realized for whatever it may be. There isn't any forbiddance. Nihilism is the philosophy of nothingness, and nothingness is pure potentiality. And pure potentiality is the foundation of physics itself.